I'd like to welcome you to the City of Federal Way's brand new Performing Arts and Event Center. Well, it may not be brand new, we're still working it in, and we opened in last September, and it's just been absolutely beautiful. Before we get started, I'd like to say a big thanks to Tim Johnson and his crew for bringing us all together. Let's give them a big round of applause. You know, as I said, we opened this facility about less than a year ago, and we're already so proud of it. I know that some of you have already been here for events, and some have attended the many international performances by individuals and groups in our inaugural season. Those included German Lopez from Gran Canaria, the Golden Dragon Acrobats from China, the 11 Play from Japan, the Celtic Knights Oceans of Hope from Ireland, the 10 Tenors from Australia, and the Ambiguous Dance Company from South Korea. For those of us joining us for the first time, we're honored to have you present and hope you enjoy this venue. I would like to note we've got one table that actually has the distinction of having 3 prior mayors of the City of Federal Way here, and I'll introduce them and we can have them all stand up. We've got prior two-time Mayor Michael Park, one of the original City Council members and Mayor Mary Gates, and Mayor Gene Burbidge. And over the years, you can imagine, I learned almost everything I know about my job from the example of these 3 great public servants. So thank you very much. And this facility, we would not be here today if it wasn't for their prior leadership and really hard work to make this a reality. We have a couple of housekeeping items I would like to discuss. First and foremost, I want to thank the Vancouver, British Columbia-based Heinz Group for their kind and generous sponsorship of today's events, and they're at this table. Let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you. And thank you, Steve Hines. We're going to hear from Steve later in the program. Also, I'd like to thank the support of Highline College and their Director of Small Business Development Center, Rick Shockley, Rich, and Sam Kaplan, Director of the Center for Excellence for Global Trade and Supply Chain Management. And thank you for their efforts to help organize this event. Thank you. I specifically want to thank the Port of Seattle and their partnership in helping us present this event today. In June of 2016, through a partnership with the Port, the city was able to further its research on international trade and relations through the development and implementation of a direct mail campaign centered on global opportunities in Federal Way and how to bring about today's meeting. Without the Port and their support of our research in international trade and relations, today's event would not become a reality. Additionally, I want to inform you of our 25th anniversary of our sister city relationship with the city of Hachinohe, Japan. 25 years, it's quite an accomplishment. We'll be hosting them in September as we exchange the photo exhibit entitled A Day in the Life of Hachinohe and A Day in the Life of Federal Way. Also, there are a variety of materials on international issues of interest for your selection on the tables in the back of the room. Please, at your convenience, take one of those items if you'd like. Lastly, I want to thank the Federal Way Junior Symphony. They're lovely, and this facility enables them to have a home with other community-based musicians and the performing arts entities. Before you're served lunch, I'd like to introduce the chair of the association and the Honorary Consul of Poland, someone who I understand has a history of living in Federal Way, moved here first when she first came to this area, and I hope that she will share that history with us. Ladies and gentlemen, give a warm Federal Way welcome to Teresa Inderlack-Davis.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor Jim Farrell, distinguished guests and colleagues of the Washington State Consular Association. It is my pleasure to be back home to Federal Way, where I first set my foot here in 1986 in January. So I have a history here of attending Highline College, getting my first job, and living on Pacific Highway South in 279th. So it's good to be back home. It is my pleasure now to introduce colleagues of the Washington State Consular Association. Let me introduce and then ask please to stand and be recognized. Consul General of Japan, Yoichiro Yamada. Consul General of South Korea, Lee Hyung-chong. Vincent Yao, is Vincent here yet? Director General of Taipei Economic Office. I guess he'll be arriving soon. And then Consul of Mexico, we're expecting Consul General Roberto Dandish. Mark Gunter, Honorary Consul of Ethiopia. Valery Goloborodko, Honorary Consul of Ukraine. I guess Valery is still on his way. Pedro Costa, Honorary Consul of Brazil. Natasha Savage, Honorary Consul of Albania. Daravuv Huth, Honorary Consul of Cambodia. Katalin Pierman, Honorary Consul of Hungary. Quan-Ting Chen, Taipei Economic Office in Seattle. Miguel Velasquez, Honorary Consul General of Peru. I know he was here. Rachel Jacobson, Honorary Consul of New Zealand. Michael Biggins, Honorary Consul of Slovenia. Kristina Kjuka, Honorary Vice Consul of Finland. Clary Aida Manzon de Pineda, Consul of El Salvador. Claudia Gatica, Consul General of Guatemala. And Luis Mingo Nissen, spokesperson of Consul for Mexico. We hope that other colleagues will join us and arrive soon. On behalf of the Consular Association, I would like, first of all, thank the mayor and Tim and the entire city of Federal Way for this opportunity of meeting with you today and discuss ways that we can work together in the future. We're looking forward to expand on connections already made, mentioned by the mayor, and establish new relations with the city of Federal Way that would benefit the region and also the international communities that we represent. Throughout history, new residents and foreigners contributed greatly to the economic and cultural landscape of this region. The unique character of the state was in fact shaped by the diversity of immigrants and people from all over the world who call this region home now. As consuls and foreign representatives, our mission is to serve our nationals living here, partake in international cooperation, organize cultural celebration to share our heritage, and provide consular services to our citizens who are either living here or working here or visiting and may need diplomatic help. The Consular Association that I'm representing has been created in 1997, but the diplomatic relation in history goes much further in Washington State. And the mission is to embrace the importance of consular, economic, and international cultural affairs in the state of Washington. Currently, there are 47 foreign consulates and missions accredited here in the state of Washington, 8 career consuls, and 38 consulates that are led by honorary consuls, as well as Foreign Economic and Cultural Office of Taipei. Altogether, the association has 57 members, and that includes retired and international organizations and associations members. The purpose is to advance our mutual members. So we get together so we can speak with a common voice. And although we each represent and promote relations for our respective countries, we all care about our citizens' well-being, protecting their rights, their access to services and emergency assistance. Our scope of responsibilities includes facilitation of cultural exchange between cities and universities, as well as trade relations between Washington State and our home countries, as well as promoting tourism and business investment opportunities going both ways. And to this aim, we as a Consular Association foster relations with the U.S. authorities at federal, state, and city level. And that is why it's so important, and we have so much gratitude for you today that we have this opportunity to improve and establish our relationship with the city of Federal Way. Our members are current, retired, and former Washington State Consular Association members, and they're also organizations that are very active in the international trade. We are working with local and multinational organizations to uphold the mutual values of respect, inclusion, and building a community that is welcoming, thriving, and safe for our nationals. On behalf of Consular Association present here today and the entire association as a whole, we're looking forward to engaging with you further and contribute to the success of international trade and partnerships with the city of Federal Way. Thank you so much for your attention and having us here.
Looking for a new location or expansion for your company or organization, and your business does not require you to be next to air cargo and marine facilities or a high-priced city center, think Federal Way. Federal Way is located in the state of Washington along the Pacific coast of the United States. It is centrally located in the Seattle-Tacoma metropolitan area. It is along the waterfront of the Puget Sound Inlet and shadowed by the majestic Mount Rainier. Significantly, it is at the interchange of Interstate 5, the major highway that runs north and south along the west coast of the nation, and State Route 18, which connects to Interstate 90 that runs east and west across the nation. Federal Way is minutes south of one of the largest international airports on the west coast, and is 30 minutes from both the ports of Seattle to the north and Tacoma to the south. Washington has robust international trade activity, ranking 7th in the United States with nearly $130 billion in imports and exports. Washington, specifically through the ports of Seattle and Tacoma, is a major port of entry into the United States, with 60% of imported goods bound for the rest of the country. Washington, as is Federal Way, are both receptive to foreign investment and trade. The region has excellent logistic capabilities to meet the needs of businesses through the support of the movement of freight to and from marine and air facilities by air, rail, or truck. The main countries of trade are with Canada, China, Japan, South Korea, United Arab Emirates, Taiwan, France, Russia, and the United Kingdom. Federal Way is in excellent proximity to major markets. It is located nearly in the center of 9 million consumers from Vancouver, Canada through Seattle and Federal Way to Portland, Oregon. 60% of the state's 7 million people are located within a 2-hour drive either north or south of Federal Way. Federal Way, by its location, is equidistant between London and Tokyo, providing businesses the opportunity to talk with both markets in the same day. If you are engaged in international relations, the state of Washington and Federal Way would be beneficial for your location or expansion as well. The state has nearly 40 foreign consulates and hosts 132 sister and friendship city relationships, along with multiple business and cultural affairs organizations representing a variety of nations. Federal Way is also home to the Honorary Consulate of Seychelles and has two sister city relationships, Hachinohe, Japan, and Donghae City, South Korea. It also has a cultural exchange with Shantou City, China. Federal Way is proud to be a community of an ethnically diverse population representing a broad array of foreign-born residents, including many from Pacific Rim countries. The population manifests as a young, educated, diverse, and skilled workforce, where employers will find over 100 foreign languages spoken. Federal Way is in proximity to a variety of institutes of higher education, and soon will be home to a satellite campus of the University of Washington. Federal Way offers continual educational opportunities that support employers' current and future needs. Federal Way is already the location of a number of businesses and organizations involved in international trade and relations. They include Cogent, Tommy Bahama, World Vision, Valmet, and the Korean Broadcasting System. Federal Way is minutes south of one of the largest international airports on the West Coast. Airlines provide dozens of non-stop daily flights to international destinations in support of business and leisure travel. Federal Way is a young, burgeoning community with a skilled and diverse labor force. The city has excellent infrastructure and systems supporting the movement of freight, and our receptive government is favorable to foreign trade and investment. Your company would also benefit from reduced costs in Federal Way. Along with Washington having no unitary tax, Federal Way has little, if any, local taxes. Federal Way provides an array of campus-style Class A office space, which is priced 38% less per square foot than downtown Seattle and 27% less per square foot than downtown Tacoma. Federal Way as a home offers an excellent quality of life. Situated between two mountain ranges and next to the Puget Sound, the views are unparalleled. The city hosts many amenities such as retail, local activities, tourism, dining, medical care, and routine conveniences. Centered on nearly 9 million people from Vancouver, Canada through Seattle, Tacoma, and on to Portland, Oregon, Federal Way is by all accounts a wonderful location for companies centered around international trade, maritime and air freight logistics and support services. Focused on high global impact through international relations, Federal Way is an ideal location for organizations both foreign and domestic, such as educational institutes, government agencies, and nonprofits. So, if you are looking for a new location or for expansion and it does not require you to be next to air cargo and maritime facilities or a high-priced city center, think Federal Way. This production has been made possible with a grant from the Port of Seattle.
Good afternoon and welcome. It's a distinct honor and privilege to welcome such an esteemed group and organization such as yours to Federal Way. In my position as mayor, today's event allows me to highlight the citywide belief that no matter what is going on at the federal level of the United States, our intention in Federal Way has always been and will be to build relationships, foster growth, and cooperation. This is no more evident than with today's event. This forum did not get planned overnight. It has been the culmination of many years of dedicated work by our staff at the City Hall, engaged in research, analysis, and strategic development. This event today is based on 2 years of careful and thoughtful consideration of your time and interest in the effort to build a relationship and to foster growth and cooperation with your association. But it started nearly 4 years ago when I directed the formulation of the city's first economic development strategy. The strategy, upon its completion, identified that for Federal Way to become a sustainable and diversified economy, international trade and relations would need to be a key component. But as a mayor and a learned person on economic development, local and regional political leaders want to partake in international trade and relations because of its potential dividends. but also because it creates just great economic development and the connections that arise from it. Local and regional governments, specifically in the United States, try to be similar to their state and national counterparts in participating in trade development, but find that the inherent costs of supporting international trade are difficult to sustain. Thus, to stay engaged, they redirect resources to optimize outcomes toward the achievement of jobs and increased tax base. While an honorable effort, it is hard to decipher dividends specifically in the short term. Current scholarly writings on economic development identify that international trade and relations for local government is a long-term commitment, as you all know. So let's be honest, even with Federal Way's long-term commitment, specifically with its sister cities and friendship city relationship, I think it's fair to assume that globally, Federal Way is not recognized as a heavyweight, not yet, let alone middleweight or featherweight, international trade and relations. But secondly, Federal Way is unfortunately overshadowed in the global markets by its neighbors to the north in Seattle. However, I strongly believe that Federal Way has the ability to enhance its global presence in international trade and relations, and today's event will illustrate those opportunities. Federal Way, being part of the Seattle region, was identified by the Brookings Institute as one of the 19 global centers for intellectual capital. And as you saw in the video, Federal Way has a variety of locational advantages that provide opportunities for international trade and relationships. Humorously, though, we don't have a head tax and are not even contemplating one, just FYI. Promise. But as part of the Seattle-Tacoma region, Federal Way brands itself as one of the most internationally connected regions in the nation. Federal Way, by its location, is in its close proximity to the maritime operations of both the Port of Seattle and Tacoma. The Seattle-Tacoma region comprises one of the largest container complexes in the nation that not only serves the Pacific Northwest, but also the Midwest, the East Coast of the United States, and Canada. Federal Way provides a low-cost opportunity for those who do not need to be next to a maritime or airport facility, but just near it. Federal Way is also minutes from TSAC's International Airport, a major air hub with rapid air cargo shipments to anywhere in the world. SeaTac has become one of the fastest growing airports in the nation. An interesting factoid, flights from SeaTac Airport are 1 to 2 hours faster to Japan and Korea than those from Los Angeles or San Francisco. And in fact, actually, the boats are about a day faster. Thus, Federal Way's proximity to SeaTac Airport is a valued locational advantage for business and industry. The region is also a major land transportation hub through trucking and rail routes. Overland shipments can make it to Southern California as quickly overnight and to the East Coast in as little to 5 days. Coupled with these locational advantages, Federal Way is home to several companies engaged in international trade and organizations involved in international relations. World Vision, a global humanitarian organization that has its headquarters here. Tommy Bahama, where would we be at without Tommy Bahama and their great shirts? A clothing manufacturer houses its international services and support care here. Cogent is a global data systems provider and has taken up operations on the former Weyerhaeuser campus, now known as the Green Line campus. Valmet, a Finnish company, is a manufacturer and supplier of various technology in the pulp and paper industry. The Korean Broadcasting System opened its doors in 2017, serving the potential 7 million viewers in Washington. Marty Bain, president of Overseas Container Forwarding, has his firm located here. And most recently, the globally focused Diagnostics, the first laboratory in the United States to offer saliva-based hormone testing, is preparing to open its operations here. In addition to the presence of these mid to large size firms, the presence of small businesses is also prevalent. Entrepreneurship is alive and well in Federal Way. As of 2017, it is estimated that 70% of the businesses in Federal Way enjoy between 1 to 4 people. Our economic development strategy identified that the next wave of globalization is forecast to be driven by small business, which have already established a strong presence here. Noting the contentious trend of small and big businesses collaboration, accessibility to big business infrastructure and improved technology opportunities for small businesses in the community will continue to grow. To ensure this growth, we're honored to have such wonderful community partners as Highline College and the support we receive from the Small Business Development Center and their Center of Excellence for Global Trade and Supply Chain Management. Together with these entities, we're also fortunate to have the Greater Federal Way Chamber of Commerce, whose CEO, Becca, is here. Becca, thank you so much for all your work. And it serves to provide to businesses with certificates of origin for those engaged or wanting to engage in international trade. However, the Federal Way International Trade and Investment is not limited to merely the exchange of goods, services, and capital, but rather it encompasses exchange in education and scholastic, tourism, arts, sports, culture, and so much more. In that regard, as it pertains to so much more, my city is seeing a growing population with nearly 100,000 residents, making Federal Way the 9th largest city in the state of Washington. This growth includes increased diverse populations with many Pacific Rim heritage. Today, 40% of our population in Federal Way is comprised of Asian American, African American, and Hispanic American backgrounds. To illustrate just how diverse the community of Federal Way is, the Federal Way Public Schools estimates that well over 100 languages are spoken in the homes of Federal Way residents, making the city rich in both ethnic and cultural diversity. And we actually have the superintendent of our school district here, Tammy Campbell. Let's give Tammy a big round of applause. The contributions from each culture are vital to building a center of international trade and relations. Additionally, another opportunity for increased growth opportunities occurred in January of 2017. I directed the city to enter into a partnership, a memorandum of understanding with the University of Washington, Highline College, and the Federal Way School District in an effort to bring a satellite campus for higher education in Federal Way. The dream and the intent is to have it just across the parking lot, eventually serving thousands of Federal Way and regional students. So the idea and the intent is to offer educational offerings to include certificates, associates, baccalaureates, graduate degrees, and for the preparation and early acquisition of college credits by high school students. This action will help ensure a skilled labor force. Furthermore, Federal Way is home to many international events and venues which host international activities. For example, the Pacific Bonsai Museum, I think Kathy is here, Kathy McCabe, is a world-class facility drawing visitors, enthusiasts, and practitioners from around the globe to visit that collection. And that Bonsai Museum, I believe, is probably one or two in the world for its number one in the world, right, Kathy? So, and the King County Aquatic Center, I see we've had an individual there, Mike Dinwiddie, who's run that facility for, I think since its opening. It was built 28 years ago to host the Goodwill Games. It has since hosted a variety of international events, including the upcoming International Underwater Robotics Competition, which I look forward to. I'm going to take my little guy to see that, which starts this week with teams and participants from 19 countries. As I identified earlier, this venue, specifically in the adjacent theater, the one we're in now, has been host to a variety of international performers, drawing crowds from around the state. Later this summer, Federal Way will host the annual Desna Cup, the largest Russian-American cultural and sporting event in the state. It's 3 days of soccer, music, dancing, along with a cornucopia of Russian Epicurean delights that brings over 100,000 participants and spectators. And in June of 2019, next year, Federal Way will also act as one of the many communities in the Puget Sound to host the Korean American National Sports Festival. This event will bring more than 5,000 participants and spectators along with a variety of Korean traditions. For that event, I want to make sure to proclaim Federal Way as the Korean barbecue and kimchi capital of the United States. But as I stated earlier, even with all these great assets, Federal Way is not yet a global heavyweight, middleweight, or even a lightweight when it comes to international trade and relations. But the Federal Way community can achieve such levels. Let me explain. You know, as many people know who know me know that I'm a film buff. And I'm reminded of the 1959 film The Mouse That Roared, a British satire that starred Peter Sellers, one of my favorite actors. Becca will appreciate this film reference. Sellers' talent shines in this film as he portrayed multiple film roles depicting the bumbling monarchs and leaders of the fictitious nation of Fenwick. As the story goes, Fenwick was renowned for its main export, a Pinot wine, globally known as the Pinot Grand Fenwick. But its arrogant government technocrats found themselves impacted by the cheap knockoff from a California winery, undermining Fenwick's annual revenues while simultaneously deflating their pompous attitudes. The story continues as the bumbling leaders of Fenwick seek retribution for the action from the Californian Yanks. Fenwick's response to its embargo, Fenwick's response is to embark and declare war with the United States to get their attention. Fenwick's provoked response is associated with piracy and the audacity of the lowball action, which negatively impacts the gross domestic product and livelihood of their nation's residents. It's a humorous example of how a small featherweight of a nation taking on a global behemoth, hence the name of the movie, The Mouse That Roared. While we do not have a winery in Federal Way, it is the similar. Well, we do have a winery. We have one winery in Federal Way. It is the similarity of trying to be recognized as a serious and provocative nation, or in Federal Way's case, as a serious community engaged in international trade and relations that make us similar. So now as you've heard my comments and awaiting the pending comments from the individuals following me, you will hear Federal Way roar. But don't worry, we're not going to declare war on anybody. Promise. Federal Way is committed to international trade and relations. You will witness our community's persistent networking, leading to global opportunities, and you will be positively impacted by Federal Way's call to action. And as I intend to extend an invitation to host your organization on an annual basis. It is this commitment, persistent in actions, that illustrate our seriousness to identifying and exploring future relationships with your association and individual members, as Federal Way is centered on global opportunities. Well, thank you for your time and consideration. I look forward to working with you in the future. Now we've got our speakers. We have three wonderful speakers today on the topic of international trade and relations. I think you'll find they will continue to provide the excitement and roar of Federal Way. Our first speaker is Maroon L. Khoury, MD. Maroon L. Khoury, MD, is a medical director of Diagnostics. He brings decades of experience in international medical research. Founded in 1987, Diagnostics was the first laboratory to introduce saliva-based hormone testing into routine clinical practice, creating a powerful tool for evaluating stress and hormone-related diseases and illness. As a medical director with Diagnostics, L. Khoury's major accomplishment include the creation and pioneering of saliva, urine, and stool-based testing. L. Khoury continues to innovate and refine non-invasive lab testing using cutting-edge technology and methodology. So, Doctor?
Thank you very much, Mayor Farrow. Thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure for me to be among you today. I'm a bit nervous, as you will notice. Mr. Hines was asking me, do you do this all the time? I looked at him, I said, yes, I give medical seminars. But I noticed that he's not nervous at all, and I was wondering what's the reason, whether he's on tranquilizers or muscle relaxants. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Maroon L. Khoury, and as Mayor Farrell said, I'm the medical director of a clinical research lab called Diagnostics. Diagnostics, as Mayor Farrell mentioned, established actually in 1984, registered in 1987, and its main course of business is purely non-invasive when it comes to medical testing. And what I mean by non-invasive means no venipuncture or no any other procedure is done in order to extract a biological specimen. A biological specimen could be saliva, urine, blood, or cerebrospinal fluid, and probably other specimens. We deal with saliva, urine, and stools. And our saliva branch is a huge, very big branch because we're not involved only in just sending a test, receiving it back, giving the results out, getting paid. No. Diagnostics invest approximately between 17 to 22% of its budget back into research. And we do saliva trying to find out biomarkers or markers in order to help us do our clinical diagnosis, or in other words, that become clinically relevant. As you well know, in all diseases, we need to have a biomarker in order to indicate us and lead us to the cause of the disease. And the biomarkers are numerous, from inflammatory biomarkers to tumor biomarkers and so on and so forth. Our job is to extract and find those biomarkers in saliva. Today, kindly, I would like to ask you not to teach your children anymore not to spit. In the past, spitting is a sin and is impolite. Today, we urge a child to spit in order to take this biological specimen, analyze it in our lab, and tell the parents about the thyroid hormones or other hormones or other biomarkers that could influence the kid's life, adults and elderly. I remember when I was at Georgetown as a medical student, and we wanted to take a blood specimen from a kid, we used to fix the kid, she or he, fix them literally on the, on the bed in order to take the specimen. Today, we could do the testing by just purely spitting. What do we get out of saliva as biomarkers? Male and female hormones. We do have some inflammatory biomarkers that would indicate certain inflammatory processes, chronic illnesses going on. We do test for H. pylori, the famous bacteria that you all know about it, and a lot of studies in South Korea about Helicobacter pylori, in Japan and in China. And we do also test it through saliva. And although it's not excreted by salivary glands, but it's present in the oral cavity. We're working as we speak on tumor biomarkers, mainly in the oral cavity and elsewhere in the body. Briefly, just to make it brief, anything that we can find in blood, we say we should be able to find it in saliva. Now, the difference is the quantities or the amounts of that biomarker. Of course, they're not going to be the same or in the same amounts as in the serum or in the blood. Using the state-of-the-art technology, diagnostics today is being able to isolate some of those biomarkers. But this is an endeavor, and it's intense. It requires the scientists, and we are blessed over here to be next to what I call it, coming from Georgetown School of Medicine, and I'm proud of it. I believe it's the best. But coming to the Northwest here in 2009, I always say, thank God I'm next to a giant when it comes to medicine and to medical research. You've got UW here in the Northwest. I gave it the name Harvard of the Northwest. And it is true. It is true. And if you ask me why I call it the giant when it comes to RMD and medicine in general, usually in medicine or in any other field, when you want to evaluate an institution or a school or a university, you look at the number of clinical papers and research that come out of that institution or of that medical center. When it comes to UW, you have such a generous minds, I would say, of scientists and really professors of medicine that you see those valid, legitimate papers. I mean, you see papers all over. But you want legitimate papers, and we are blessed here to be close to UW. The second part of our business is Interplexis, the company called Interplexis, and it's a 30 years old company too. Diagnostics is about 32, 34. Interplexis deals with R&D on supplements and nutritional supplements. As you all know, supplements today are everywhere and it's part of our daily life. You can rarely find someone who is not on a certain supplement or being supplemented with a certain herbal, nutraceutical, product. But we took a line here when it comes to supplements after the big research on the effects and the side effects of supplements on human bodies. I believe, as the literature states, thousands of people, as I was mentioning here at the table a few minutes ago, enter the emergency room on a yearly basis because of supplements. And it's being abused, and the raw material sometimes is not the right raw material or the pure or the cleanest one. That's why we took a line at Interplexis to get into R&D and try to come out with a line of supplements which is non-GMO, not genetically modified, and no excipients. Excipients are the fillers that you add it to a supplement in order to pack the pill. And usually those excipients or fillers, they are irritants in one way or another to the digestive system, and many inflammatory diseases, whether inflammatory bowel disease or irritable bowel disease, are caused at times by those fillers. So this is the second line of R&D that Interplexis is in. Now, we came over here, we chose and opted to be and live in Federal Way. The reason we came over here as a over 30 years institution, of course, being in research, we had to research also the place that we're going to spend our next 50 or 60 years or more in here. And we picked Federal Way. The reason we picked Federal Way is, if you rent or buy a house, you want to look into the area and look into the conveniences, the stores, the medical centers or clinics, the communication, the infrastructure, and whatnot. We found actually, Mayor Farrell was talking about the northern aspect of Seattle, which is true. There is a mass and heavyweight people that commute to Seattle. But in our situation here, we found that being in Federal Way is extremely convenient for us because of the modern infrastructure, and I'm sure those of you who know the area, it's perfectly moderate and modern and extremely convenient when it comes to commuting and communication. We're about 14 miles from SeaTac. We're close to Tacoma, port, also water and air. We travel a lot. Every 3 to 6 weeks, diagnostics has to be somewhere giving a seminar or a lecture. We've been to Japan, couple of times. We've been to China. We'll be back in Japan for the third time in November. In September, we'll be back in China. We've had colleagues from South Korea working on certain pathologies or certain, mainly mentioning the kimchi and its effect on H. pylori. It's a study that came out of Seoul, and it's a legitimate study, the effect of kimchi on H. pylori, that it would keep H. pylori kind of what we call it in a bacteriostatic or dormant or paralyze it for 60 days at least if you continue eating kimchi. So the study is a legitimate study. It comes out of a decent medical center, which is Seoul Medical Center, which is a highly respected medical center. So we're in Europe on the same standard. So we are internationally active between Europe, Asia. I mean, as Mayor Farrell mentioned, traveling to Japan was 9.5 hours. I didn't expect that. We travel a lot to Germany, to England, I mean, quite often, and it's 9.5 hours to 10 hours, which is extremely convenient, being in this area. I really would like to thank the City Hall of Federal Way, namely our Mayor Jim Farrell and Mr. Tim Johnson, because after we've seen that it is suitable for us from an infrastructure point of view, as I said, the modern context that we are in, the facilities, the last question you would say, how is the City Hall? What do they offer? And investigating this part, which is very important part for an international, institution like ours, everybody said they're big on services. I reached a conclusion today when people ask me and we say, we're actually adopted over here. And it's an adoption. And when we see how the city is always ahead of the business, trying to call them if they need anything or if anything they could do, and when you have something that you need, it's done quickly and immediately. And I believe it's extremely convenient for businesses to be in Federal Way. Another point I would like to mention, business in Federal Way, and I would like to draw the attention of everybody here, is that's true, the northern part of Seattle harbors also, an elite community when it comes to from engineering to scientists and you name them. But do not underestimate the southern part of Seattle, namely Federal Way City and the cities around it. I usually establish a checkpoint and I catch or kidnap employees that are trying to commute to Seattle, to the medical centers and whatnot, and say, hey, why do you want to go all the way to Seattle? We're here. We're right next door. You don't have to go all the way through the traffic jam and whatnot. So we catch the elite, especially the UW graduates, which I'm highly interested in from a medical point of view. And I believe that, we're very lucky, and I encourage everyone, to do the same. So I would like to thank the City of Federal Way, namely the mayor. I thank you very much. Mr. Tim Johnson, who's always been ready and present all the time. I really appreciate your services. Thank you very much, and God bless.
Thank you, Doctor.
We didn't portray any pictures here.
All right, thank you, Doctor. Our next speaker is Stephen Hines. Stephen is the owner of the Hines Group. He brings over 35 years of experience in real estate development. He's a prominent Vancouver developer who's gained the title of the, quote, communitarian capitalist. He has spent a career seeking innovative solutions to complex and challenging development questions. When he first began his career, he worked with the renowned Canadian architect Arthur Erickson, where he learned how to create a sense of community in all of his projects. As a developer, his major accomplishment includes the Vancouver skyline staples, such as the Copper Building, the Waterfall Building, and the Chocolate Park Terrace. He has earned 2 college degrees from the University of British Columbia and Simon Fraser University. Let's give a big Federal Way welcome to Mr. Hines.
Thank you, Jim. And very exciting stuff.
Absolutely.
Very.
Thank you.
My name is Stephen Hines, and I'm the president of the Hines Group. We've been in the business of developing and expanding prefabricated housing communities for 45 years, and more recently, high-density urban development projects. We own the Belmore Mobile Home Park, which is one of the focus points of the Federal Way Renewal initiative that has brought us together today. Our business has, in the past decade, experienced a dramatic shift away from individual family-owned and operated parks, or small groups of parks in a particular area, to large operators who regard the parks as a uniquely valuable asset class. They buy hundreds of parks and compare themselves by the number of spaces that they own. The largest of them now number over 200,000 spaces with values in the many billions of dollars. By comparison, the largest our company has ever been is about 15,000 spaces. But we've always had a unique place in this business. I can tell you that my parents genuinely appreciate life in a mobile home community. In part, this likely arises from the circumstances of my birth. It was well after midnight on a cold Saskatchewan night, and my father was helping my very pregnant mom to the bathroom. And something was obviously wrong as Mom tried to sit down. The toilet seemed somehow too high, and they soon discovered that it had broken away from the floor and was lifted on about a foot-high column of ice. And somehow this seemed to send my mom into contractions. And Dad braved the bitterly cold ice and snow and got my mom to the University Hospital in Saskatoon. And about 48 hours later, I appeared. Anyway, my dad's always been a maverick and really very much ahead of his time. And birth at the time was regarded as a surgical procedure. Dad demanded to be in the room. And they physically restrained him from going in. And it took a couple of Mounties to take him out for a cup of coffee to gain his cooperation. But over the next few months, he was instrumental in changing hospital policy to allow dads in the delivery room. So that's really where it started in Canada. And so began a family tradition of pursuing modern, liberal values. Foremost among these are democracy and community engagement, evident in the many mobile home communities we've touched across the United States. Everyone, without exception, the finest in its area. We are chased relentlessly by the large-scale aggregators who recognize that we lead the market in creating value and building community. Our secret is that we know that the value is in the community, and that people treated with honesty and respect respond in kind. It's a remarkable thing that every homeowner in Belmore Park has agreed to leave their home with 3 years' notice. I think this testifies both to the relationship that we have with our residents and especially their spirit in recognizing the evolution of Federal Way and what it is in the process of becoming. So what is Belmore Park like, you might ask? And we have a brief video to show you. As we rise above the forest of Belmore. This is a mobile home park. And we'll be taking a quick trip down one of the fairways here. I should have put music in. Anyway, a quick note of environmental engineering. Have you noticed the lights in this room? Average light level is always the same, but there's a starlight ceiling running and it makes the place feel a little airier, a little nicer. The future of community is inextricably tied to the way we choose to build our buildings. Do we follow the current model of high-rise isolation in which increasing density actually decreases community awareness? Or do we find another model? Our work in Vancouver has shown that people who live in towers are actively disinterested in their neighbors and often do not know the names of anyone in their buildings. May have had similar experiences. I regard this as a problem of architecture, and it is something we've been working on in Vancouver for many years. We've designed and built a number of urban prototypes. These buildings mix contexts and design elements to create village-like spaces across multiple stories. And we add things like village medical programs in which a clinic is built to provide services specifically to the community, and housing for the doctor and the medical program is also provided. Several hundred units will fill the practice of a general practitioner, who can then be paid in part through the strata or by the landlord in a rental situation, providing huge benefits to the residents, and creating and recreating the old style of compassionate medical care that brought doctors out on house calls. They become much easier when everyone lives close together and the doctor is a part of the community. And there are many specialized forms possible. We're currently working on remarkable mixed-use designs aimed at the tech industry, working with large tech companies and universities in British Columbia. This isn't the place to talk about this, but I'll be very happy to share them soon. Such innovations are a strong draw to the creative workforce that today's leading tech companies rely upon and have great trouble retaining as a consequence of narrow housing choice and high living cost. One thing I can say about this kind of work is that it is hard to carry out in most urban centers. The zoning ordinances, building codes, and city staff who wall themselves off from innovation with a kind of smothering self-protectionism kill most creative development before it ever gets to a public process. And one of the most exciting things about working in Federal Way today is the remarkable openness and encouragement that we are seeing to creative ideas. I can tell you that in 35 years of work in this field, I've never been pushed by a local government to actually do more, until I was invited to do so by the wonderful people here in Federal Way. And in particular, their visionary mayor, Jim Farrell, and engaged and insightful creative whip, Tim Johnson. And it's with their guidance that we've created a video vignette of one possible urban future. If you could play that. There is music here. Thank you. A few comments about the Federal Way extension of Sound Transit Light Rail that will be operational here in 2023. This extension will provide a direct link to Seattle and points north. I've heard many people compare it to a sophisticated park and ride and concerned that it will take up valuable commercial parking. It's so much more than that. Our SkyTrain in Vancouver provides the precedent In what was a far smaller city with far less industry and investment when it began, SkyTrain has been jet fuel to the expansion of urban centers, creating a new regional identity and powering an amazing growth in a variety of industries. You could play the little bit of video that we have left. This short video illustrates what SkyTrain has done almost everywhere a station has been built. In every case that you're seeing, the SkyTrain came first. The development you see around the stations is an unprecedented turn away from the car culture that went before. Today, 60% of the people who live close to the stations do not have a car at all. And many more use their cars very differently. No longer commuting. It's a sea change of urban land use that I think we will see here in Federal Way far sooner than anyone realizes. Wall of buildings after the SkyTrain. This is particularly sort of poignant because as the SkyTrain rolls by, you can see what's happening. And development extending out into New Westminster in an area with that kind of density just was never experienced before, and all clustered around these beautiful little stations. There's no question in my mind that Federal Way is unique in its ability to provide a stage for the kind of creativity that will draw workers and industries of the future together in a new kind of urbanism. This comes from what, in my experience, is the unprecedented coincidence of 5 factors. First is a genuinely desirable location at the crossroads between the tech juggernaut of Seattle and the industry of Point South. A highly progressive, sophisticated, and motivated city government. A very small number of landowners holding large parcels in the urban core. It's critically important. Control is available. The soon-to-arrive light rail connection to points north, and, as it's commented earlier in one of the presentations, the low cost of urban core land in relation to almost every other jurisdiction in the area. As a developer, I can tell you that each of these is rare on its own. Together, they provide the kind of encouragement that makes me want to pinch myself to see if I'm still awake. You know, this is what we need to turn our backs on years of moribund history and false urban progress, and to step forward into a new urban frontier. Well, thank you.
Great. Thank you. Our third speaker is David McFadden. David brings over 25 years of experience in economic and business development to the Port of Seattle. He's a mission-driven manager who spent his career building local economies and promoting sustainable economic development. With experience at the state and local level, McFadden has wide-ranging know-how in the areas of business development, city planning, workforce development, tourism, real estate development, and public relations. As the managing director of the Port's Economic Development Division, he leads the Port's small business, tourism, workforce development, and real estate development initiatives. He's earned his undergraduate and graduate degrees from Western Washington University, is a former elected school board director. Please give a warm welcome to Mr. McFadden.
Thank you, Mayor Farrell. It's my pleasure to be here and be a partner with the City of Federal Way. And also a shout out to the Consular Corps Association. I've heard great things about you from my associate Karen Zaug-Black, and I know that my commissioner Courtney Gregoire is also looking forward to speaking to you in a few short months. So we're connected, and I have to just step back. I was very impressed with Mayor Farrell, Maroon, and Stephen. They did a great job, and there's a lot of excitement in this community. And to me, Federal Way's embracing new business and working to keep local business happy, putting that welcome mat out is a significant step. As Mayor Farrell mentioned, I've been in economic development in several communities over time. Not every one of them has put that welcome mat out, and it's just simply too easy. There's too much world of opportunity, and the Maroons and Steves will find it, and they do care about the welcome and reception they get from the communities where they want to invest. And so my hat's off to Federal Way and the good work you're doing. Let me advance aside and talk a little bit more about the port. Mayor Farrell started, but let me give you a little better snapshot. We've over 100 years ago, we were created at a time when the Seattle waterfront was rather chaotic, and private forces were not necessarily developing the waterfront in a way that was beneficial to the public. And so port districts were created at that time, and Seattle took over and started redeveloping the waterfront. And so over that 100 years, we have grown into the 4th largest container port in the United States. We're home to the Alaska fishing fleet. We enjoy the largest cruise port on the West Coast. We're one of the largest landowners in the region. And I forgot that we own a little international airport. And so we do a lot. We're a little unique, or probably one of the handful of port districts across the United States that both manage an airport and a seaport at the same time. Next slide, please. So the port tangibly supports our private industry here in Washington State and our educational partners. We really support world leaders in agriculture, retail, technology, and science. The port's really a partner for economic development. You'll find that written into our statute, and we enjoy supporting this region's stellar business climate. Next slide. The region is indeed booming. Seattle gets a lot of the attention. Seattle is the fastest growing city in the United States right now. We're the crane capital of the United States, but I want to add to that, it's not just the city, the entire region is prospering and booming, and Federal Way is an exciting place to be, along with many other cities here in the Puget Sound. Next slide. Really what I see is, our unemployment is dropping to historic lows. We're anchored by tremendous companies, whether it's Microsoft, Amazon. We've got great university partners, as I mentioned. It is a great time to be in the Puget Sound, and I really think we have one of the most favorable business climates that you could find around the world right now. Next slide. So let me talk a little bit about our gateways. We're really a portal. We're a connector. And as Mayor Farrell has said, we're a portal Federal Way, but we're also a connector of the entire Pacific Northwest. I want to highlight how these gateways influence our economy and make it attractive, especially for that foreign investment. So next slide, please. I'll be talking about containers, maritime, fishing, and cruise, and let's just keep going. So 3 years ago, we formed a historic alliance called the Northwest Seaport Alliance. For decades, the ports of Tacoma and Seattle were competing for the same business, the same opportunity to land or load container ships and participate in international trade and logistics. As that global industry changed, got more competitive, and started really scrutinizing where it wanted to send ships, it really did not see much of a difference between Seattle and Tacoma. And so it was not obvious at first to the ports, but it became obvious over time that we needed to be a partners rather than competitors. This has been a 3-year alliance, and now, as a perfect example, the Port of Seattle is investing in new terminals in the Port of Tacoma. We're looking at the Port of Tacoma investing in new shipping terminals in Seattle over the next 5 years. By working together, we're doing what is necessary to compete in a very, very mature and low margin industry worldwide. And so big stakes, but I'm very pleased that we are taking steps to position ourselves to continue to enjoy shipping into the future. Next slide. Our cruise port is thriving. The slide that I'm showing you really shows that we didn't have a cruise industry in Seattle 20 years ago. We've gone from 0 passengers to over 1 million in that 20-year period. Now, I smile because we do count them twice. Okay, we count them when they leave and we count them when they come home. But this is big business, and we're the largest cruise port on the west coast of the United States. Alaska is probably the most popular cruise destination in the world right now. It's a bucket list trip. And so what we really expect is that market will continue to grow. Our latest market study says the cruise market in Alaska will grow, it will double in the next 20 years. Partially, that's because the boats are also getting bigger. We just landed a brand new boat that now accommodates close to 5,000 passengers in Seattle. That's up from an average of more like 2,500 to 3,000 passengers. And so the industry is incredibly healthy. The boats are getting bigger. We've got a popular destination. The Port of Seattle is scratching our head and going, okay, how do we grow this industry over time? So, next slide. This is actually our oldest facility. The first acquisition the port made over 100 years ago was to buy Fisherman's Terminal. And we have been a home to fishermen for over 100 years and continue to be the home port. That we may catch most of our fish in Alaska, but the boats come home. All the work, the maintenance, the services, support is done out of the Seattle area. And so it's an incredibly important industry to us. The boats are getting bigger. The fish are still out there. They're getting a little harder to find. So this is a very dynamic worldwide industry. Alaska, though, is one of the most sustainable large fisheries in the world. So if we take care of it, we're going to continue to enjoy this industry in our backyard. Next slide. And then about the airport. Talk about how we're investing, how we're promoting sustainability. We've obviously grown at record terms, and we're trying to do the right thing with the communities as we grow. So next slide. Amazing growth at SeaTac. I think over the last 5 or 6 years, our passenger employment has grown by almost 50%. You really look at it, it's really a function. We're a growing international community, and we've landed a number of new international flights. But Delta has also, really made Seattle a large part of its future, both establishing an international hub, but many, many domestic flights as well. So for a couple of years, just a couple of years ago, SeaTac was the fastest growing airport in the country. We're not quite there anymore, but we've grown from probably 15th, 16th airport by size in the United States. We're now number 9. And next slide. We're not resting on our laurels. With that growth, you've seen, it's a busy place. It's even congested on certain days. We are building as fast as we can to try and manage that growth. $2 billion, both with new gates on a North Satellite, but also very significant, a new international arrivals facility is well into construction. I think as many of you know, we have very limited capacity at customs check-in for international arrivals. We are working to fix that, and we should have this facility done and ready for operation in about 2 years. Finally, a lot of what we think about is as we build facilities, as we operate our facilities, we want to do good as we do well. And what I really mean is the airport takes in a lot of revenues, the maritime terminals take in a lot of revenues. We want to take some of that upside and invest it in workforce training, invest it in disadvantaged businesses, invest it in some of our communities so that they can benefit from the port's activities as well. So as an example, we have a brand new diversity and contracting policy where the port's put a lot more emphasis on working with disadvantaged businesses or making major new investments in workforce training, especially to support aviation and maritime industries. So what I've shared with you is we're a blend of all that tradition, but we're also moving in new directions to really be relevant and help the community move forward together. And so I think last slide. That's it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I think we've run a little bit over our time, but I'd like to thank Teresa and your organization for coming here. Thank you so much for coming here today. Let's give a big round of applause for our speakers today. Thank you again. I think this was very productive. Hope to do it again sometime, and come back to Federal Way anytime. Thank you very much.